Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I'm very glad that you joined us today in this joint seminar that is organized by the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, the Islamic Development Bank, and the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment of the United Arab Emirates. We are delighted to be able to discuss today with you how we can better manage the risks and the impacts of drought that causes millions of dollars of loss through harnessing the latest technologies and experiences from the field. And through these, we develop effective drought management systems that increase climate resilience in agriculture. Please join me in welcoming His Excellency Dr. Thani Al-Ziyuti, Minister of Climate Change and Environment of the UAE, to inaugurate today's session and provide his welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and good evening. It's with a great pleasure I welcome you all to this side event on the climate resilience for agriculture. At the outset, I would like to thank our co-host, the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, ICBA, as well as the Islamic Development Bank, and the Association of International Research and Development Centers for Agriculture for organizing this important event today. With the Paris Agreement and 2030 Development Action Plan in place, it is now clear more than ever that addressing climate change is urgent, as its impacts are affecting all segments of our economy and environment, and in particular the agriculture. Over the last week, delegates attending COP22 here in Marrakesh have voiced the importance of addressing impact of climate change on the agriculture sector, which is a lifeline sector for all of us. The increasingly changing climate patterns are being observed in many places, from erratic rainfalls to increasing temperatures. Arid regions such as MENA is particularly vulnerable to episodes of droughts, as we already face the challenge of limited freshwater resources, high temperature, and high evaporation rates. With the growing population, we need to come up with effective measures to manage our growing food demand and finite water resources to ensure long-term food security, especially in view of potential increase of droughts. In the United Arab Emirates, we're taking a number of measures. First is effective policy framework. We have launched the National Water Conservation Strategy in 2010, mainly to safeguard our groundwater resources for agricultural uses. Second is the establishment of comprehensive understanding of water resources in order to facilitate integrated water resource management. For this, the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, in cooperation with the relevant authority, developed the UAE's first water atlas last year, which mapped out detailed information including quality of soil, surface water, and groundwater. Third is the innovation and adoption of latest technology. We have programs to harvest rain and manage floods throughout dams, and projects to increase groundwater recharge rates. We're investing in research and developments in the last irrigation technology and hydroponics to increase water as well as energy efficiency. We also have the state-of-art rain enhancements program. Furthermore, we are collaborating with ICBA and many others to look into crops that are suitable for production under the arid and saline local environment. Last but not least is awareness raising and capacity building. We are working to ensure that all those engaged in the agriculture field, from policymakers and farmers on the ground, are well aware of the impacts of climate change and prepared for droughts, are very well informed about the importance of water conservation and utilization of the latest technology as well as innovation. But clearly more needs to be done, and this is why I greatly welcome the work done by ICBA and others to better predict the droughts and to enhance the resilience of agriculture sector to climate change. We very much hope that this side events will contribute to better understanding of the work that is undertaken by our partner and serve as a platform for further cooperation. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the best in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And now, if you can join me in welcoming Dr. Abdel Hakim Al-Wa'er. He's the Director of Corporations and Resource Mobilization, as well as the Director of Country Programs in Sub-Saharan Africa region for the Islamic Development Bank.
Thank you, Seta. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, Excellency, and all ladies and gentlemen. We're very proud at the Islamic Development Bank to host you in the pavilion at COP22, but also have a more proud story to tell and keep telling all the time about ICBA and our history with ICBA. Our president always says that, well, we initiated the idea, we initiated the effort, and we're still behind it and will continue to support ICBA. So we're very pleased and honored to host ICBA's activities in the COP22 today, and provide and align the support that we always need. We know very well ICBA is there for a mission that is more required by our specific member countries and communities. We know how much fragile the environments we live in today. Long before the climate change issues were addressed, we're coming from a region which is dominated by desert, and we are the earlier sufferers of this climate change. So it has changed at our grounds before it changed globally. One said, well, we shouldn't worry too much about adaptation. We're already into it for centuries. Alhamdulillah, today IDB Group as a group total has reached a total spending of $119 billion since inception in all sectors. But more importantly, we have reached a region of agriculture is reaching about above 10% of the total spending, and that covers all areas of agriculture, including water, sanitation, irrigation, and support to small farmers, and so on and so forth. And that also covers rural areas development. And we align a lot of activities with ICBA, but more and more now we align them with the climate change general policy. I think I would wanted to end up by saying that on the climate change in general, we wanted to see more on adaptation, less interventions, at least on our side, on mitigation. And this is coming on a serious note where we have seen that the latest statistics that came out in COP21 in Paris, where more than 80% of the financing for climate change was going for mitigation. Now, when you say mitigation, it's purely renewable energy, and it's purely import of new technology from developed nations to developing nations. Our member countries, the 57 of them, we proudly say this, and sometimes we claim, observers might claim that we are a bit sidelining on one side, but we are purely a South-South cooperation bank that is established by its own member countries, run by its own member countries. And so we really do care about the interest, and we wanted to see a shift. Morocco took the lead on launching the initiative of AAA, which is purely agriculture for adaptation, although it's focusing on Africa, and we hope to expand this on the rest of the member countries. But that is an initiative on the right track, and we need to keep pushing for it. And here we assure the bank will and commitment to lend more investment into this side. I think I'll stop here, but I cannot close without saying a few words on insurance in general. The bank is one of the MDBs that also took the lead in establishing ISEC, which is the Islamic Corporation for Insurance and Export Guarantees, and it is a well-established entity. It's one of our 4 entities. You see them there, ISEC taking the lead on providing guarantees for export as well as insurance for investment. And it was established as a result of what we call COMSEC. COMSEC is the OIC Committee for Ministers in charge of economic cooperation. And they've realized the need to have an entity among the OIC region to look after guarantees of export and guarantees of investment. And so ISEC was born as a result of the agreement among the OIC region, and it is very unique in the fact that it does insurance for export and risk, but it also covered by multilateral. And that gives it a unique niche that I will discuss more at during the panel discussion on how we can benefit from that comparative advantage. Last but not least, I would like to, on behalf of the management at the IDB group, again reassure ICBA and all our partners of our continuous support. And we look forward to address some of the key issues, policy matters related to climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul Hakim. So drought may not be on the daily news. If we open the news, the coverage of drought is minimal. When we compare it to politics, or even when we compare it to floods, when we compare it to hurricanes, and that's not because drought doesn't bring misery, it's not brutal, but it's just because the damage that drought causes, it causes it over prolonged periods. And as Abdul Hakim so rightly mentioned, it is the South countries that are feeling the brunt of the drought. If we look only at the Middle East and North Africa region during the past 2 decades, drought was the major causer for displacement of people and for death, more than any other natural disaster. It brings so much misery and suffering to so many people. And today, I would like to welcome first Dr. Rachel McDonald, who will give us a presentation of the state-of-the-art system that ICBA is putting in place to be able to alert countries in the region before droughts hits it. So, Rachel?
Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon session. I'd like to acknowledge the important input to the work from USAID funding, but also our core donors, the Islamic Bank, the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and of course, Environment Agency Abu Dhabi. Unfortunately, on top of those general figures, we've heard today that this has been the warmest year on record, 2016. But in addition to those global averages, we have these appalling drought events where we have much drier, much hotter conditions. And it's these that can often cause the most damage, as Seta has mentioned. So here in North Africa this year, in Tunisia, and we're going to hear from our colleagues in Morocco, it's been a particularly severe year. And this has caused great misery to so many people here. If we look at how it's going to go for the future, let's look at some of these graphs and some work that we've been doing at ICBA. If we take the last 30 years and draw the average rainfall for those years, we can use that as a baseline, and we can then look at projections going forward as to where we're going to be. Can you see these lines here? Anything below the line 0 is a drought. It's a less than average conditions. So we can see going forward between 2030 and 2050, under the 2 different scenarios of climate change, RCP 4.5, RCP 8.5, we have a great increase in droughts. So we can see when it's likely to happen, but also where. And we need to have this type of information to look at climate change adaptation. And it shows the importance of how we need to manage and develop systems right now to manage what's going to happen in the future. So I'd like to present to you a MENA RDMS project, which is funded by the USAID. The framework that we're using under this is developed by the international communities, the United Nations, the World Meteorological Organization, and the Global Water Partnership. And under this, they have developed a framework for drought management. Unfortunately, so often, drought is a crisis. The drought comes, ministers, decision makers panic, and a lot of money gets used. trying to deal with those situations. And what is needed is much more a risk-based approach. Droughts are going to happen, so we need to be able to plan and manage them, have the data to do it, but also have the financial structures in place. As Dr. Hatim said, insurance, infrastructure, investment. So to do that, we have to start during the period that it's not. And the global community has put together an integrated drought management plan. In this plan, there are 3 main pillars. This is built up over many decades of experience of successes and failures in drought management. The first part is vulnerability and impact assessment. Where, who, which parts of the economy are most impacted in this country. So a drought in Morocco is different from a drought in Tanzania, is different from a drought in Malaysia. And we need to then look at, in those countries, what is the greatest vulnerability and impact assessment. We also then need to set up monitoring, because when a drought comes, we need to be able to show where it is, because that's where we have to focus our resources. That's where we have to refocus our management systems. And we need to have a technical database that's away from politics, because drought is always political. Who gets the money, which sectors, where? And so that's why we need drought monitoring. And the last part is to put forward a series of practical planning and mitigation responses that might include financial systems. It might include rules for where and who gets the water. When does agriculture stop getting the water? When is it focused on humans? So it's this 3 pillars approach that are found to be important. What I want to focus on today is some of the early work that we've done under this project. And it's all about setting up drought monitoring that we can take to our 4 focus countries: Morocco, Tunisia, Jordan, and Lebanon. And within each of those countries, we first have to define drought. Drought isn't just about lack of rainfall. It's about lack of water storage. There are meteorological indicators. It might be snowpack in Lebanon and Morocco. It might be rainfall in Jordan and Lebanon. But it's also hydrological. What's the level in the dams? What's the level in the groundwater? What's the level in the wadis and the rivers? But it's also biophysical. Can we identify stress levels already in the crops, in the vegetation we're looking? Because it's those 3 sets of indicators together that allow us to monitor droughts. This is where we're aiming. So one of our major partners is the University of Nebraska National Drought Mitigation Center, which is arguably the best drought center in the world. They develop each week, this weekly drought map that shows not only where the drought is, but the extent of the drought. So we can see, this is this week's graph, and we can see that there's still that persistent drought in Southern California. And with each degree of classification of drought, you will get different mitigation policy measures that instigate it. So this is where we're starting from. So how do we begin to put together this type of drought monitoring for the MENA region? Well, first of all, we have to have data sets, which Dr. Fatima will highlight in a minute in her talk about Morocco. Accessing data sets and bringing them together is really difficult. We have all sorts of institutional as well as data collection things. So one of the areas that we can look at are global data sets. And these are the areas that we're looking for at the moment. We've got things like rainfall sets from University of California, Santa Barbara that generate them on a regular basis, evaporative stress index, and even things like moisture levels. Here we're using NASA models, NASA data generation capabilities, because we then have reliable, readily accessible data in which we can develop for the Middle East, North Africa, drought monitoring. And so this is some of our early maps. By putting these various map systems together, we can generate a composite drought index. So this is showing you for the January this year, where we have more rainfall, more wetness than usual, but also more dryness than usual. And unfortunately, this area in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia is highlighted very clearly where that drought was. We can also see some of the drought going in from Lebanon into Syria. And so this is an early start to what we're wanting to do. And what we know, though, is drought is managed at the country level. So as part of our work, we've been developing country-level maps. This is December 2015. We can begin to see the various degrees of drought within Tunisia. And one of our most important parts of this project is taking this complicated data technology, packaging it into an easy-to-use system, and taking that to the countries and training it. So it's all about technology transfer, capacity building, because this has to be a sustainable system that is usable in the country and is part of the decision-making within this country. As you can imagine, this is quite a challenge, and I'm sure our fellow panelists are going to be highlighting some of those issues. What we know is that this mapping system is just part of the planning process. It tells us what we need to do. So how do we then bring all that knowledge we have in the region about smart water management, the ever smarter crop management? Which crops should we be bringing into place to be able to use in these systems as we see drought becoming much more part of day to day? And what was most important is that drought becomes part of any climate change adaptation strategy. So as countries are developing their UNFCCC reports, as they begin to do like that, through this project we're able to support their ability to deal with these most difficult situations and help the most vulnerable during those times. So this project, it brings together data revolution, but it also brings together lots of our field experiment to be able to ensure that those most vulnerable rural and particular communities are most helped through their system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel. And now, please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel, Dr. Ismahan El-Wafi, the Director General of ICPA, Dr. Abdel Hakim El-Wa'er from the Islamic Development Bank, Dr. Radwan Arash, economist and statistician at the Ministry of Agriculture in Morocco, Dr. Fatima Driouchi, the head of National Climate Center at the National Meteorological Department in Morocco, Ms. Alexandra Hadji Vadanovic, the Regional Environmental Advisor for the MENA region at USAID, and Dr. Sam Gameda, the leading soil scientist with the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Sector. Thank you. شكرا عليكم.
Seta, I think there is a gender discrimination on the way we're sitting. It happened by nature, but I think it's better, yeah.
To start with Dr. Ismahan, just as a follow-up to Rachel's presentation. We just heard about the system that ICPA is developing with support from USAID, the Islamic Development Bank, and the government of the United Arab Emirates. So can you elaborate on what prompted this initiative and the vision for the future?
Thank you, Seta. So actually, the project started at the beginning with looking at the marginal environments. That's really the core of what ICPA works for. So looking at the marginal environments, if you know marginal environment in any ways, you will understand it's very vulnerable to climate change. And also you would know that one of the major limitations there is water. So the story started about 6-7 years ago, where the group at ICPA started thinking, what could we do? How could we help those marginal environments to take advantage of the mega data and the data that exists to plan better their future? And that's where a program called Mawrid started. And the Mawrid in Arabic means the source. And the Mawrid in the project that Rachel and her team developed means a source of data. So it's a source of data whereby this group, in collaboration with Nebraska University, right, and with the NASA and funded by the USAID, put together a project whereby they went to countries, helped them to develop a model and include the data to have a better projection of what will happen in terms of climate change and mapping of vulnerability to climate change. So that project was very crucial. It was very interesting, very successful. It provided those governments with access to the highest technologies to be able really to understand, is it in this region are you going to have +1 or are you going to have more wet or less wet? So it helped really those governments harness the data to know better what's happening in the short term and long term and have actions and policies to target it. From the Mawrid, that was actually in several countries in the MENA region, we moved at the second stage. So the Mawrid, it's data. It's about downscaling of climate change to a very high resolution to understand it. But then when we did that, in collaboration and consultation with those governments we work with, we realized that those countries have no access to information in terms of knowing what's happening next. And that's where the drought management idea came, where we start discussing with our partners. And as you see, we took 2 countries from North Africa, we took 2 countries from the Levant, and we included the university, Nebraska as well? Nebraska University with us. So what I'm saying is that we had the first phase whereby it was about downscaling of climate change, and we moved to the next level. So if you have the downscaling and you understand it, could you have a model that will help you really know that there is a drought coming in the next few months? And that's what the project was about. So just to sum it up before I pass it on to others, this model could be easily done in other places. It's a model that took about 2.5 years to develop the model itself under the first phase. So it's very good that we capitalize on the work and the legwork that was done by the scientists at ICBA in collaboration with Nebraska and with NASA, and use that model, customize it to other parts of the world.
Thank you. So I'd like to move to Radwan. Radwan, Morocco is currently undergoing an intense drought. And in the meantime, we also started our drought program here. So can you shed light a little bit on what the country's experience has been with drought management, and what can we learn in terms of cross-sectoral approaches to managing drought?
Merci. Donc, c'est un plaisir pour moi de participer à ce panel que vous organisez ici à l'ICBA. Alors c'est un plaisir pour moi de participer avec vous dans ce débat sur le suivi de la sécheresse dans les pays comme le Maroc, la Tunisie et les autres pays que vous avez cités. Alors pour commencer, je dirais que le Maroc a une longue expérience en matière de gestion des crises de sécheresse. Pourquoi cette expérience? Bien sûr, vu sa situation dans l'Afrique du Nord, donc c'est un pays à risque qui est exposé tout le temps à des épisodes de sécheresse. Donc ces épisodes ont permis au Maroc d'accumuler une expérience, bien sûr, dans la gestion de la sécheresse. La question de la gestion des crises de sécheresse est liée à l'histoire. C'est très important pour moi. La première, c'est que avant de passer à cette gestion de crise, un peu d'histoire. Donc, dans l'histoire, dans les 40 dernières années, le Maroc a vécu 3 grandes périodes de sécheresse météorologique qui a eu des conséquences sur la sécheresse agricole, bien sûr, sur les réductions de rendement, de superficie, sur tous les impacts que vous connaissez dans de telles situations. La première période, c'est 1981-85, où les précipitations ont baissé de près de 40%. Et ces précipitations ont baissé de près de 40%. Ce déficit climatique, il est bien sûr variable d'une région à l'autre. Il y a des régions qui ont enregistré des déficits jusqu'à 80% de ce qui est habituellement reçu dans ces zones. L'autre chose très importante aussi dans le suivi de la sécheresse, dans la gestion des crises de sécheresse, c'est que c'est le niveau des barrages au Maroc qui est très important. Dans la période 81-85, nous avons atteint des niveaux de 30%, c'est de la rareté, pratiquement. On est au fond du barrage, donc il n'y a plus de disponibilité en eau, on pratique le rationnement de l'eau dans les périmètres irrigués, et ça a des conséquences bien sûr sur les rendements, sur les cultures et sur le revenu des exploitations. La deuxième période de sécheresse connue au Maroc, c'est 91-95. Et c'est une décennie qui a connu beaucoup d'années de sécheresse, beaucoup d'occurrences des années de sécheresse. La même chose, nous avons vécu une réduction des précipitations de l'ordre de 40% et des niveaux de remplissage des barrages de l'ordre de 25 à 30%. Et cette même situation aussi a été vécue entre 98 et 2001. Donc regardez, il y a une période cyclique qui se répète, 81-85, 91-95, 98-2001. Et c'est des épisodes qui ont marqué le style, ou bien le concept de gestion de la sécheresse au Maroc. Et c'est comme ça que le Maroc a gagné en termes d'apprentissage de gestion de la sécheresse. Maintenant, je vais un peu mettre le point, si j'ai bien sûr du temps. Si je n'ai pas beaucoup de temps, vous pouvez m'arrêter. Alors, la sécheresse de 1981, c'est très important. Il a choqué le Maroc. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'il est venu dans un temps non propice du tout. Pourquoi ? Parce qu'il est venu en 81, il y avait la crise budgétaire, il y avait la guerre, il y avait le climat politique qui n'a pas été favorable, et donc tout ça a exacerbé les effets de la sécheresse de 1981. Donc nous avons assisté en 1981 une situation où les agriculteurs abandonnent leur cheptel, tellement qu'on savait quoi faire, on ne savait pas quoi faire. C'était tellement grand et tellement important que c'était difficile de mettre en place un programme bien conçu, avec des organes de gouvernance, avec une procédure, etc. Donc c'était un choc à mon avis, et ce choc était important pour le Maroc, pour être rappelé que la sécheresse est vraiment une menace pour l'agriculture et pour l'économie. Aussi, la gravité de la sécheresse de 81 est venue dans une conjoncture où le Maroc avait, je dirais, presque 3 jours d'importation en devises. Et donc, c'était une crise majeure. L'autre chose importante en 1981, c'est que l'agriculture occupait une place très importante dans l'économie du Maroc. Et donc, tout le monde vivait de l'agriculture en milieu rural. Il y a une forte population qui vivait en milieu rural. Et donc, lorsque la sécheresse a frappé, c'était vraiment, à mon avis, c'était la première catastrophe de sécheresse. Et nous avons assisté à une baisse des effectifs entre 81 et 85 de 40%. Donc imaginez que les agriculteurs, leurs moyens de survie, leur capital a été disséminé par la sécheresse entre 81 et 85. Et il y a d'autres facteurs, bien sûr. Il y a le facteur climatique, mais il y a d'autres facteurs. Je vais en parler aussi dans la suite des discussions de son panel. Comment nous avons géré en général la crise de sécheresse ? Moi, je le qualifie d'étant une gestion de crise. Il est orienté gestion de crise beaucoup plus qu'une gestion, disons, stratégique, de planification stratégique, de vision à long terme et d'intégration dans le processus, disons, de mise en place des politiques agricoles, beaucoup plus qu'une crise orientée, un management orienté gestion de crise. Et donc, lorsqu'on gère la crise, c'est urgent. Il faut agir tout de suite, il faut répondre aux besoins des populations, surtout en milieu rural où il y avait beaucoup de pertes, beaucoup de besoins. Donc les principaux traits des programmes, bien sûr qu'ils sont venus à la hâte, il n'y avait pas beaucoup de budget, il n'y avait pas beaucoup d'infrastructures. C'est très important aussi dans la sécheresse, je vais en parler par la suite. Une infrastructure très faible, donc comment faire arriver ou délivrer les services qu'on veut donner aux agriculteurs qui habitent très loin, et il n'y avait pas une infrastructure routière développée comme maintenant, etc. Donc il y a beaucoup de facteurs qui ont joué. Mais les traits principaux de la gestion de ces épisodes de sécheresse, particulièrement avant 2000, c'était la fourniture d'eau potable pour les populations, parce que les premières évaluations ont montré que la priorité des populations, c'était l'eau. potable. Il fallait accélérer. Donc, c'était le programme avait comme objectif premier de fournir de l'eau potable, protéger le cheptel, parce que 40% de baisse, c'est grave pour repeupler le cheptel. Il faut créer de l'emploi parce que le milieu rural vivait pratiquement de l'agriculture. Et donc, tous les emplois créés dans le milieu rural provenaient de l'agriculture. Donc, il fallait trouver un moyen pour créer de l'emploi, en plus, bien sûr, des réductions de dettes des agriculteurs. Ça, c'est les principaux traits du programme. Mais le message principal, c'est que nous étions dans un concept de management de crise. Merci.
Thank you, Radwan. Those examples from the two crises are really very important and demonstrate the shock that comes from being unprepared. So, which takes me to my next question to Fatima about the data, because the system itself is built around the data and the accuracy of the data that goes into this drought system. So can you tell us how this drought monitoring is being undertaken in Morocco to ensure that the data going into the system is accurate to be able to generate the maps that would help the ministry and other agencies to move from disaster to risk mitigation?
Okay, thank you, Seta. I will respond in French. So, comme ça a été dit par Monsieur Arash, donc le Maroc a enregistré différentes périodes de sécheresse. Et c'est des sécheresses qui ont eu des impacts bien significatifs sur l'agriculture et l'économie nationale. J'ajouterai dans ce sens que l'évolution avec le temps de l'aspect sécheresse et aussi des précipitations tout court a montré une tendance vers l'augmentation de l'aspect sécheresse, notamment en termes de persistance temporelle. Et si on regarde les séries de données de précipitations, on constate que le Maroc a enregistré plus d'années sèches que d'années humides ou même normales, et notamment pendant les dernières décennies. Et d'ailleurs, même le 21e siècle, il a été marqué par plusieurs sécheresses au niveau du Maroc. Ajouté à l'observation et donc au changement observé, il y a l'aspect changement futur aussi. Donc, quand on regarde les différents scénarios de changement climatique selon les différentes émissions, eh bien, on trouve que les modèles, donc ça a été question aussi de modèles, donc les modèles, que ce soit les modèles globaux ou bien les résultats de descente d'échelle dynamique et aussi statistique, ils donnent une évolution vers un futur encore plus sec et aussi plus chaud, ce qui assèche davantage les sols. Même si on reste avec des précipitations constantes, rien que l'augmentation de la température, elle assèche les sols, elle fait souffrir les plantes, etc. Et donc ces deux facteurs combinés, bien sûr, l'amplitude de ces changements dépend de l'amplitude des émissions de gaz à effet de serre et donc de la trajectoire que la communauté internationale suivra dans le futur. Eh bien, les projections donnent malheureusement pour le Maroc, comme pour la zone méditerranéenne d'ailleurs et différentes régions en Afrique du Nord, une évolution vers un climat encore plus sec et plus chaud. Donc tout cela fait qu'il est très important d'assurer un monitoring de qualité et aussi une prédiction de l'aspect sécheresse pour ne pas rester juste dans la gestion du risque, mais il faut le prévoir et bien sûr mettre en place les actions et stratégies permettant de minimiser justement l'impact de cet extrême climatique qui est la sécheresse. Alors, quant au cas de la direction de la météorologie nationale, eh bien, le monitoring, il commence d'abord par l'observation et la mesure. Donc, il faut assurer l'observation, la mesure et traiter les données, bien sûr, et puis faire un post-processing, donc les traiter. Et ils sont ensuite traduites, ces données, ces informations, pour le cas de la sécheresse, elles sont traduites sous forme d'indices permettant justement l'évaluation de la sécheresse et le monitoring de l'aspect sécheresse dans différents types d'indices que vous connaissez. Ces indices permettent aussi de faire les analyses, les études, les corrélations, chercher un petit peu les causes quand c'est possible. Et on a aussi l'aspect prévision. Donc prévision et prédiction. Donc on a un aspect prévision saisonnière, donc des évolutions, précipitations et températures, mais aussi de l'aspect sécheresse à travers des indices de sécheresse comme le SPI ou autres. Et toutes ces informations, bien sûr, elles sont mises à la disposition de nos partenaires et usagers, que ce soit de façon comme ça directe ou bien à travers des travaux de collaboration et des recherches et développements qui sont faits justement dans l'objectif de minimiser les impacts de la sécheresse sur, bien sûr, les économies et sur les aspects socio-économiques du pays. Voilà en gros. Merci.
Thank you, Fatima. Alexandra, in times of drought, the complex water allocation situation between the different sectors becomes very intense. And as Radwan mentioned, in the drought of 81, drinking water was given priority, as is usually the case. So in your opinion, what are the challenges in balancing the water and food security needs of the countries in such situations?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And USAID is very, very happy to be here since we've been funding the MARED activity and the work with NASA
Can I get
for a
it
few
closer
years now.
to you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Micro.
Yeah, closer.
Yes.
Okay. So again, thank you for inviting USAID. We're very happy to be here. We've been supporting the activities with MARED and with NASA with the Water Information Security Platform, and we're very excited to be working on the regional drought monitoring system. To answer your question, I think this is an application of the data that is being collected and the next step of the raw information that you've all spoken about. There's competing demands, of course, between municipal water supply and water supply for agricultural use. And I think the three biggest challenges are for governments to use raw data before a drought to plan how to allocate that water. I think that's a very big challenge that hopefully our work can help address. Another difficulty or challenge, as you put it, is the population growth. Population has doubled in the region in the past 20 years, and food production has gone up 30%. This has led to 70% usage of agriculture for irrigation, leaving very little water left over for municipal services. I think the third biggest challenge is the lack of ministries talking to one another. So the Ministry of Agriculture could have its own plans of how to use water for agriculture, and the Ministry of Water and Sanitation or Water Resource Management can have its own plans on how to use water for sanitation and hygiene. And those two ministries are not necessarily talking to one another. So when there is a drought scenario, each ministry will go up to a cabinet or to parliament or whoever is in the government saying, here is our plan. And they haven't cooperated or communicated. And that affects people on the ground. So those being the three main challenges, I'm hoping that with this work, we will be able to provide data and bring ministries and different bodies together to communicate better and to come up with harmonized plans to deal with drought situations in each of the countries.
Thank you. Abdel Hakim, IDV is a major global player in financing critical development projects, and in your welcoming speech, you touched upon some of those figures. So as a member of the senior management of the bank, what role do you think the bank can play in supporting communities manage droughts, whether it is through investment, which you have been doing, but also through insurance?
Yeah, well, it's a normal question. You come to a banker and you ask about money. You know, banks are not always very as generous as people think. One definition of a bank is an institution that will give you a loan after they prove that you don't need it. So, now, going back to the issue of drought, that's at professional capacity. At personal capacity, I'm an environmental scientist by background, and I can continue talking on drought. But what strikes me, especially from our institution as an Islamic Development Bank, we derive our principles from the Islamic faith. And we're very proud that Islamic finance touches upon how do we share risks with beneficiaries. And here we're talking about risks. I think the best at all, and luckily this story exactly is a copy and paste in all the holy books. So we hear it in the Bible, we hear it in the Torah, we hear it in the Quran. And it's the story of Prophet Yusuf alayhi salatu wasalam, that he was gifted with the explanation of dreams, of what they will. And at that time, the king of Egypt wanted to know the dream that he kept seeing of 7 fat cows being eaten by very slim, thin cows, and 7 spikes of wheat that are green, and another 7 dry spikes. And he was looking for that. And that was explanation of how to deal with drought, was a school by itself to prepare for drought. I'm concluding by one statement said by an African leader in one of the AU summits, an extraordinary summit addressing famine in the Horn of Africa after a heavy drought that hit the region. And he concluded by saying that we cannot control drought, but we can control famine. And it is true that whatever we do, we cannot stop drought coming. And what we are doing is that how do we manage the risk that is resulting from drought? And that is what we are doing and exchanging here. I think I'm grateful to all the previous speakers because they have addressed the scientific part of drought, and also how do we monitor it and follow it and produce some early warning systems that would make us predict it. That makes our task as bankers much easier. One of the things that we do is that we insure risks normally. And I mentioned that we're proud that among the MDB groups, we're one of the few multilateral development banks that have an insurance set-up entity. And not just that, it is also set up ISIC, the Islamic Corporation for Export Guarantees, is set up to guarantee investment as well, not only export. And that is unique among the other insurance schemes. Also, you know that insurance basically is based on profit generation through large insured part of the society, with hopefully a small level of claims back. And that is how profit can be generated in an insurance industry. This risk management or risk insurance under drought conditions is completely different. The risk is too high and the business profitability is very low. And that's another dimension where we are unique. We are a development institution. We are not really profit making. So that is where we see the benefit is very high, and we can contribute to the development of the small farmers that would help them to have more guarantees on managing risks that result from drought. Now there is another important element that we have in the setup that gives us a comparative advantage. We are a multi-government institution. The governments are represented by ministries of finance. So we can build something what we call sovereign guarantees from governments to be able to insure the small farmers. Small or big private insurance companies cannot do that because they cannot get a sovereign guarantee from governments towards risks and losses, even when it is touching upon their own small farmers. Currently, nothing is being done on that. However, the potential is high, and I think we need to work closely with ICBA, maybe start piloting it at one stage. But I wanted to share with the audiences here a very important piece of information. We were created, or this entity, what we call ISIC, on insurance and export and investment insurance and guarantees, was created as a result of the request of the Ministers of Economic Cooperation. Now, these are not agriculture ministers, and they're not finance ministers. They're ministers of economic cooperation. And they look at the whole economy performance at their 57 member countries. And they meet under COMSEC, which is the Committee of the Economic Cooperation, every year in Istanbul, where it is a permanent secretariat is based. And we are meeting, by the way, for this session of this year next week, where I'm heading most probably directly from Marrakesh to Istanbul for that session. It's the same committee that has issued a decision a few years ago to establish a fund managed by IDB for managing risk from drought. It was very specific, and I think I can work closely with ICBA to dig into those previous resolutions and we can revive it. And they've called upon all the donors in the region actually to pledge financial money for IDB to manage in order to risk impacts, adverse impacts from drought. I think I will stop by mentioning one initiative. Before I joined the bank, I had a brief, not short and not long, 8 years service at the African Union, where I have witnessed and I was part of setting up the ARC. It's the African Risk Capacity, and it's established based in South Africa. It's an AU, and it was a result of the famine hit in the Horn of Africa around 2009, 2010. And I think it's good to learn some lessons from. They're working very closely with FAO and IFAD to get some lessons from that. It's still an early institution, but it's basically goes around setting up an insurance scheme for insuring risks resulting from drought.
Yes, a very important aspect. And Sam, Ethiopia, the droughts in Ethiopia and the devastations have been in the news numerous times, the losses in human lives and so on. So can you share with us some of the lessons learned from Ethiopia?
Yes, thank you, Seta. Yes, as you say, Ethiopia has experienced some severe droughts over the past 30, 40, 50 years. And probably the ones known the most, earlier on, 1972 to 73, a significant one that was revealed after so many, and it resulted in famine and so many people had died from it, and actually resulted in the overthrow of the government at the time. It was a significant factor to that. There was another one in 84, 85, which most of you probably are aware of, where significant, again, resulted in famine and significant numbers of people died. And again, that also had a significant impact on the government, and 4 or 5 years later, it was also out of power. And as was mentioned, 2009-10, there had been some lessons learned from previous ones that had helped mitigate this, but still some impact that was happened. But maybe one thing you do not know is Ethiopia also experienced the same level of severity of famine just a year ago, in 2015, 2016. But it did not result in famine. And the reason for that was there are lessons learned as to what had happened in the previous ones, and also the determination not to have the same thing happen again. One thing to know is that the rural population in Ethiopia is a very vulnerable population. Even in the best of times, it has issues of food security and does not have enough food throughout the year. And one of the things that the government established is what it called the Productive Safety Net Program, where it identified vulnerable populations and set up both a cash and work-based program that ensured that these people participated and built the kind of infrastructure that the government was planning on building anyway, and therefore did not lose whatever assets they had during lean times, and therefore could be more resilient and could cope with this. So the Productive Safety Net Program, it started in 2005. It involves upwards of 8 million people, rural people, almost 10% of the population. And they participate, the able-bodied ones participate in public works programs like infrastructure, the building of terracing and earth management structures in rural areas, building of schools, primarily the building of roads, which help get the rural population have access to markets. And this program has been going on and has been successful in ensuring that this population is not vulnerable and can tide through. And related to that, and this is not a cheap program, it's in the order of $400 million per year that is involved in that. But it also has, the government also has a disaster risk management initiative in place, and the PSNP is one of these initiatives. But that program entails monitoring right down to the district level. So, and it's a multi-ministry, multi-agency program, and it involves the federal government, regional governments, different ministries and bureaus of agriculture, water, development. And so the monitoring is more in a social structure rather than environmental per se, or remote sensing, although those types of things are used. There are also warehouses that have been established throughout, so they can mobilize grain and in cases of shortages. And there's also an effort to coordinate, because USAID is one of the bodies heavily involved, World Food Program and others. These all coordinate together so that the initiatives that take place are done in a coordinated manner rather than each taking care of itself. And as a result of that, the recent 2015-2016 famine, which estimates are that it resulted in like a 20% reduction in crop production, and was quite extensive, did not have an impact on a significant impact on the population, and it did not result in famine.
That's a beautiful example, and the recent one of how you can do targeted policy development, risk reduction programs, and strong adaptation planning to be able to avert major disasters. And that I would like to, from this example, to bring it back to the colleagues from Morocco to see first what is the meteorological department doing in terms of linking the data to policy development and to adaptation policies, and to Radwan on so far how much has the drought system that we have been working on been used on changing policies.
Okay, thank you.
Merci.
Okay.
Alors, yes, ladies first. Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you, Seta. I would like to say that the Moroccan Meteorological Department is quite well involved in and engaged in the process of informing the decision making in terms of climate, in terms of information about climate evolution for both observed and forecasted and also projected aspects of climate. And this includes information about mean and also extreme events such like drought. And for example, we have been involved in several works and studies that aim to establish adaptation strategies to climate change in Morocco and also North Africa. For example, agriculture, water, cities, and even oasis areas. Our work consisted in evaluating the observed climate changes and evolutions in terms of several climate aspects and then drought, and also to provide information to be linked to the observed impacts, and also to provide climate scenarios information issued from climate modeling to be integrated by impact models and then to evaluate the future potential impacts and then allow suggesting more adaptation strategies. And this information on issued from climate models and which is done and given for to be integrated by impact models consists in modeled data, raw data, climate indices like drought indices, and also we have done analysis and studies and also accompanied our partners in integrating well in the right manner, to integrate in the right manner, the good manner, this information to use it correctly and then to have the most objective results, if we can say. So this is globally what we are doing, and we are open to all collaboration and also developments. And I would like to recall some multi-sectoral work we have done, for example, with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the National Research Institute, the INRA, and we could together develop an interesting product which help and which led to regular production of yield predictions. And now we are working on the integration of seasonal forecasts into this system. And also there is a lot of work in terms of future changes and impacts. Thank you.
This is what happened when you try to take the role before ladies.
Thank you. Alors, comment le système de suivi de la sécheresse en général a affecté ou bien a impacté la gestion de la sécheresse et le suivi de la sécheresse et en général les décisions relatives à la gestion du phénomène de sécheresse. Avant d'aller sur le sujet, j'aimerais bien rappeler que, disons, il y a une date très importante dans le suivi et la gestion de la sécheresse au Maroc, c'est l'année 2000. Donc avant l'année 2000, toute la gestion du programme était totalement publique. Totalement publique, ça veut dire que l'État il était très présent, donc il y avait la distribution d'orge, les cartes, les listes, etc. Tout ça, ça a compliqué la gestion de la sécheresse. Mais avec l'information sur la sécheresse, avec le suivi, avec l'évaluation, nous avons changé d'approche. Donc à partir de 2000, qu'est-ce que nous avons dit? Alors, à partir de 2000, il y a deux éléments très importants. Le premier, c'est que après cette évaluation, pourquoi ne pas approvisionner les marchés en orge, par exemple? L'orge était l'élément principal qui est utilisé par les agriculteurs pour faire face à la sécheresse, pour garder leurs troupeaux. Et c'est très important. Alors, il faut approvisionner le marché. C'est tout. Et laisser le marché faire le reste. La deuxième chose, c'est la communication. La communication, et ça a un lien très important avec l'information sur la sécheresse et les plateformes d'information sur la sécheresse. Pourquoi la communication? Parce qu'avant 2000, et je le dis toujours dans les séminaires, on disait que les informations sur la sécheresse sont sensibles. Moi, je dis toujours non, ce n'est pas sensible. Les informations sur la sécheresse ne sont pas sensibles. En l'an 2000, nous avons décidé de lancer une grande campagne de communication auprès de la population. Pourquoi? Pour dire que la sécheresse, c'est un désastre, c'est un phénomène naturel, on ne peut pas l'arrêter. Et il a été conduit sous un angle de solidarité nationale. Il faut être solidaire avec le milieu rural. Et donc c'est ça la réalité de la sécheresse, c'est un phénomène climatique. Il ne faut pas laisser les gens galérer et souffrir tout seuls. Et pour montrer ça, il faut les informer. Il faut informer les gens, à travers la communication, qu'est-ce que c'est que la sécheresse, qu'est-ce que l'ampleur, qu'est-ce que c'est que les baisses de précipitations, quel est l'impact de l'augmentation de la température, etc. Ça, c'est très important. Ça, à mon avis, c'est une date très importante dans la conception de notre relation avec la sécheresse. Donc, après cette date, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Alors, on n'arrête pas de nous dire lors des préparations, des plans de développement, lorsqu'on conçoit les politiques agricoles, que la sécheresse est devenue un phénomène structurel. Il faut l'intégrer dans votre politique, votre vision, pour gérer la sécheresse et tenir compte dans toute décision à venir. Alors, c'est bien sûr ça, c'est un élément tout à fait logique, c'est vrai. Et la sécheresse est un élément structurel. Alors, nous avons commencé par des réformes. Et les réformes économiques sont importantes. Je dis aussi toujours que policy is a part of problem and policy is a part of solution. La politique agricole, elle est responsable de ce qui se passe dans la sécheresse. Lorsqu'on veut disons, atténuer les effets de la sécheresse, la politique est responsable, la politique agricole. L'ampleur des impacts est due aussi à la politique agricole. Je donne un exemple. Dans les années 90, par exemple, nous avions des taux de protection à la frontière très élevés. Et donc, lorsque la sécheresse survient, les agriculteurs ils font face à des prix très élevés des aliments de bétail et aussi des aliments, des produits de consommation alimentaire. Et qu'est-ce qui se passe? Les agriculteurs lancent leur cheptel sur les parcours et donc la charge animale augmente, et il y a des problèmes de dégradation de parcours. Tout ça, il est lié, à mon avis, à la politique agricole. Donc après cette période, qu'est-ce qui s'est passé? Nous avons commencé par des réformes. Bon, je citerai quelques-uns, par exemple dans les réformes que nous avons engagées, qui ont eu un impact sur la gestion, sur la manière de voir de la sécheresse. Alors c'était premièrement la question du commerce extérieur. Il y avait une réforme du commerce extérieur en 1993. Donc le commerce extérieur devient plus libre. Il y a plus de libéralisation. Il y avait la signature des accords des GATT. Donc on s'est engagé dans la réduction des tarifs à la frontière, etc. Ça c'est très important. L'élimination des subventions. L'élimination de la subvention sur les prix, le soutien des prix. Pourquoi le soutien des prix est-il important? Pourquoi je dis ça? Parce que nous avons suivi depuis la fin des années 70 pratiquement jusqu'à maintenant, mais la fin, disons le pic, c'était la fin des années 80, milieu des années 80-90. Nous avons suivi une politique d'encouragement du blé tendre. Donc nous avons soutenu les prix, nous avons soutenu le système de commercialisation qui a conduit à l'extension de la superficie des céréales, au détriment d'autres cultures. Et donc nous étions dans une situation d'agriculture peu diversifiée et qui est très vulnérable à la sécheresse. Donc lorsque la sécheresse vient, tout est abattu. Alors, avec les réformes, en l'an 2000, nous avons réuni toute l'intelligence du ministère, les chercheurs de l'IAV Hassan II, des universités, les géographes, et nous avons discuter sur une stratégie de gestion de la sécheresse. Et donc, quels sont les principaux éléments qui ont sorti de cette réflexion? Alors, je donne quelques fondements de la politique qui a été recommandée, en fait, qui a été proposée. Premièrement, c'était la gestion de l'eau. Il faut changer l'irrigation gravitaire vers des systèmes plus économes d'eau. Ça, c'était l'une des premières recommandations, c'est très important. L'irrigation de complément des céréales, c'était une idée, mais qui n'a pas bien réussi. Exploiter les acquis de la recherche, parce qu'il y avait beaucoup d'acquis de la recherche en matière de gestion de la sécheresse. D'accord? Il faut que notre politique ne soit plus sectorielle, il doit devenir territorial. Parce que la sécheresse frappe différemment les zones. Le sud, le nord, la montagne. Donc il faut que la politique soit territorialisée, non sectorialisée. Il faut dépasser aussi. Il faut diversifier l'agriculture. Donc il faut diversifier l'agriculture et il faut trouver de nouvelles approches de financement, des projets de développement qui intègrent la composante structurelle la variabilité climatique et du changement climatique en général. Et donc, ces mesures, bien sûr, la bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'elles ont été intégrées dans la récente stratégie qui est Plan Maroc Vert, et avec des objectifs bien sûr bien tracés en matière de reconversion de l'irrigation gravitaire vers l'irrigation localisée, d'extension des superficies de plantation fruitière au détriment des céréales, la reconversion, l'intensification des productions pour augmenter les rendements, l'augmentation de la valorisation de l'eau d'irrigation. Donc il y a une série de mesures qui a permis de mitiguer un peu les effets de la sécheresse au fur et à mesure. Et l'un des résultats, juste 2 mots, je sais que j'ai pris beaucoup de temps, donc l'un des résultats les plus importants, c'est que, vous voyez maintenant, nous avons des effectifs d'animaux plus stables que par le passé, même s'il y a une sécheresse comme 2015, il n'y a pas de réduction d'effectifs. Ça, c'est très important. La deuxième chose, les prix des aliments, on n'est plus dans le scénario parce que dans les années 90 et 80, le prix de l'orge était multiplié par 2 et par 3 pour les raisons que j'ai citées avant. Maintenant, ce n'est plus le cas. Les prix sont plus stables et donc les agriculteurs sont face à un marché qui fonctionne, des prix d'orge abordables. Bien sûr, l'État intervient parce que comme a dit le directeur de la banque sur les questions d'assurance, nous avons mis en place une couverture institutionnelle des risques de sécheresse. Je me souviens que la première fois que j'ai participé à un séminaire sur l'assurance dans les années 90, tous les assureurs privés ont dit que la sécheresse, ce n'est pas un risque mutualisable et probable. Au Maroc, c'est un risque sûr et n'est pas mutualisable. Et donc, personne dans le secteur privé ne peut le supporter. Il faut une composante publique. Et donc, c'est comme ça que l'information sur la sécheresse, les leçons tirées de l'histoire ont permis d'améliorer un certain nombre d'axes de politique qui ont permis de mieux résister à la sécheresse. Et merci.
Thank you. So in the sense of time, I'll ask the remaining of our panelists to try to be a little bit faster so we can give an opportunity to our guests to ask some questions. So we heard 2 examples from Ethiopia and from Morocco, how you can actually avert and reduce the risk. So, Asmahan, from the different rooms you walk into during this conference and you see the scenarios in the future, whether it is with whatever degree warmer temperature, marginal environments are going to be increasing. So how can ICPA's experience in those marginal environments help them to improve their resilience?
So I think both examples are wonderful, sincerely. Both examples shows the power of proper planning, government planning. If you plan it well, you won't have a change of the government, you won't have rights, you will have a stable population, people that will cope with it, and you will have everybody that's going to help the poor rural person and farmers. So this is really very nice. So if I want to talk globally, those are examples that should be actually taken to other parts of the world, and hopefully will be duplicated in other parts of the world. So if we want to talk about marginal environments, as I said earlier, if we talk about marginal environments, there are marginals that are by default with a lot of stresses, a lot of challenges, and also they're very vulnerable to climate change. The bad news, maybe in the past, it was their problem. They have to cope with it. They have to find a solution. But the bad news is that right now, many areas are going to become marginal. So with the climate change, the arable land, it's reducing. With the over-irrigation, we have more salinization than ever. As a matter of fact, the latest data shows that we lose 2,000 hectares for salinization every day. So within a year, you lose about a land like France, for example, in one single year. So the numbers are very bad. But the bad news is that it's going to affect everywhere. So we see salination in Canada, in the prairies of Canada. We see salinization in North Dakota in the US. You see salinization in Dukkala in Morocco, and so on and so forth. So the salinization and the marginalization, it's happening, and it's going as we are going, as we are experiencing the climate change impact. So when we talk marginal environments, we need resilient system. Resilient system, the one that Sam talked about in Ethiopia, the one that Ridwan showed us with Fatima in Morocco, are very important. And those are mostly policies. It's almost about mostly about how the policy works, how the policy can help. But from my perspective, we need to do more on the technical side. When I talk about technical side, we have to look at the ag diversity. Could we look for other crops that will do better? Should we continue producing what we are producing? And the example of bread wheat that Rwan said in Morocco, it's a wonderful example. Or should we help our farmers have a portfolio of crops that they could choose from? So if I am experiencing a difficulty in producing, maybe I should move to quinoa because the price is very good right now. Maybe I should move to something else. Somebody's showing me quinoa pamphlet. So on the technical side, I think we have to do more on the biodiversity and move into biodiversity as a solution to resilience and one of the components of a resilient system. We have to do more on having the right technologies for water management. And when we talk about water management, I think it's the price is the limit. And the only way we break the prices is to go to technologies that are done by small companies. It's again the private sector coming on board with SMEs, having small-scale irrigation system at community levels. That's the only way you're going to go to those marginal environments and you're going to go to those remote people. And the other component is the soil, again, because most of those marginal environments will have a huge deficit in nutrient. And right now, Sam, I don't know if you're going to talk about it, he has a very interesting study where he is linking between deficiencies of micronutrient in soil and deficiencies in health, in the nutrition of people. So how could we have a better fertilizers, better input to put in the land to improve productivity, but also to improve nutrition of people? So there are different components in the resilience, but really I think on the technological side, we are still far behind. We have to do more, and by the end, the resilient system will have it all in it. So we should have this international commitment, like in COP22, to really get the agriculture in the marginal environments to be adaptable to climate change. But we need also policies at the national level, at the regional level, at the global level, and we need technologies and packages to take to smallholders to help them alleviate the impact of climate change on them.
So feeding into that, Abdul Hakim, you did mention in your earliest input one of the potential areas where IDB can help the member countries in adapting and managing drought. Can you elaborate a little bit on other opportunities that might exist?
Thank you, Seta. I think the issue of drought and the result of drought for agricultural production can well be monitored from the technical point of view. I think that's what we've been hearing so far. Now, what we can do from the partnership point of view is that we need to bring in partners on board, and I think Dr. Smahan has elaborated very well on the need to engage private sector, investors, insurers, governments, of course, and the small farmers communities. They need all to come together to be able to meet this. The rule of thumb, clearly, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. So in order to prepare well for meeting drought, you need to be backed up with the right data. And we know that this GIS system is based on GIGO, so it's garbage in, garbage out. If you don't provide the right data with the quality and on time, you will still get garbage at the end. And to get right quality information, you need to make sure that you have quality enough data in place, and you need to have it in real time. If we take a simple example of how a fire catch up in a building, knock down a building in one of the most well-equipped countries where they have the facilities for firefighting, but it's only the lack of being prepared and the time for these services to respond to the fire that would still have the fire does its job before we reach to it. So it's about getting against time. Now, the whole key question now, how do we respond to these drought hits at the right time? Be prepared before it actually hits to face it and deal with it and manage it. And the only way is data. So decisions on the ground that are guided by policies and information and data are the only true way that we can face this. It will continue. I said earlier, we cannot control drought. We cannot stop it. but we can control the result of drought. That is famine. That is in our hand. Drought is not on our hand. It's going to continue. It's going to be worse. But how do we face it? There are a number of mechanisms. I explained a number of financial mechanisms where insurers come. Now, that is the part that we're concerned with. Why insurers do not come forward to insure risk of drought? Because they know they are going to lose. Insurance is about, car insurance that we all know, is about insuring 10 million cars with the hope that only 1,000 will come at the end of the year to claim back. So you're still making a lot of money. Insurance is the best business in the world. Only when it comes to agriculture and drought risk insurance. That is where everybody will come back to claim. So you need backup guarantees. It's not business worth it. The information that you provide from the package and the initiative that ICBA did on mapping out drought, if this would be supported by countries providing real-time data, high-quality data, and that can be verified and calibrated, it will consistently provide insurers independent data from scientists that they will be able to manage the risk better, and they will encourage them to come and put some money in the market. So that is where you get the partnership all involved. At certain stage, once you're happy with a certain areas or a certain country, that you can draw the scenario over a certain period of time, and you can convince insurers, look, we know the pattern, we know what's going to happen in the next year or the next 5 years. You can now start gathering partnership around you with the countries involved and move ahead. But that is the only way if we don't get that collective effort. We stand again as ready as financiers to go along with the ICBA same way we started and look at this. Please do not bring this set of data on ISRI on silos. You have to link it to other factors creatively that you might not think of. How the trade flows of commodities between country and another. ITC will provide you with amazing data, real time. They know the import and export across each border in the world. Be it a pen or tomatoes, they know who exports to who and who imports from who. And they have real up-to-date information. You only need to get the data and layer it over the data you already have. And that gives you another picture of seeing the drought and seeing the trade impact on it. Now, when you go to government, you can convince them, look at your economy. This drought is not only hitting people directly, it hits your GDP, it hits everything else you do. So you need to really enlarge the scale, and that would attract the attention of the partners to really take this more seriously. I hope there are no more questions for me, because I'm getting tired.
Unless from the audience you have a question.
No, that is with pleasure, of course. Thank you.
So that brings me to my last question to both Alexandra and Sam, and it relates to stakeholders. We've heard about partners, we've heard about stakeholders, and we all know that drought affects each and everyone in the community. So given your experience, what opportunities and what tips can you share with the present people here on how to involve stakeholders in a more proactive way that ensures that they are real partners in the process?
Excuse me? I think one of the most important things is to have community roundtables and to listen to a local level, to universities, to farmers, to people who provide the inputs, who are actually on the ground, because that local knowledge is something that we might not have in the capitals, and they know very well how to sense drought or other stresses on the environment just by being there and working there. So listening to the communities, I think, is very important. And we've been very committed to having those types of roundtables. Of course, there's technical expertise from the capital also, from the cities and the capitals and the governments. So I think combining those two bodies of knowledge is crucial to address drought risk and famine risks. And I know this is separate from the topic, but I know the famine early warning system, where those who've been working in sub-Saharan Africa, has been doing this and has been very successful.
Thank you. Sam?
Yes. In addition to what Alexandra was saying, yes, the partners that are involved in trying to address this, coordinating how they do this together, as I had said earlier, is an important aspect of this. And also being able to bring in others that may not be present for every condition, but who have their expertise that are pulled into it. You know, for example, in the drought I mentioned for 2015, the rains were delayed, and there was a significant impact on farming and when seasons were started. So my organization, the International Maize and Wheat Improvement Center, CIMMYT, was called in to be able to provide drought-tolerant seeds and early maturing seeds, and it was it mobilized, and it continues to do so. And another organization similar to that. So they provided that, and then there was organization that could disseminate this. So being able to plug into, in effect, what is bringing a whole host of stakeholders to participate in a crisis event or in a severe event, and having the capacity to do that is an important component as well.
Thank you. So I'm not sure if our audience, if anyone has any particular question to any of our panelists.
Thank you very much. I have a question and a comment. I think that really, thank you very much for all these presentations. And I think that we had an excellent panel and also an excellent coordinator of the panel. But I think that we had, I think that something is missing in the information. We are talking a lot in this COP22, in COP21, about the climate refugees, climate migration. But I think that we don't talk enough on the migration of plants, of crops, and also on livestock to the north. It is very, very, very important. And I would like just to give you some examples. I would like to give you some examples. You know that with an increase of 1 degree C, plants can move to the north 800 kilometers, migration to the north. At the moment, the limit of maize is the north of France. If the temperatures continue to increase as it is now, we will find maize in the southern part of Sweden. The southern part of Sweden, maize will be found there. If the temperature continues also to increase, as it is increasing now, we will find date palms in the southern part of France. And our date palms will completely disappear from our oasis. Another example, which is, you see some countries, for instance, Kenya. Kenya is a very important coffee producer and exporter. And coffee is a very, very important economic crop. Coffee will completely disappear from Kenya in 2050. Completely disappear with an increase of 4 degrees centigrade, which is really, and there are many, many examples. Regarding animals, migration of animals, there are some studies who have been done by INRA France. And INRA have shown that now, as you know, in the northern part of France, camembert is made from cow milk. But in 2050, if the temperature continues to increase, we will find camels in the northern part of France, and instead of producing milk from cows, we will start producing milk, camembert from camels. And there are many, many examples, but I think that we need to focus on all these aspects, the migration of plants and the migration of animals and their livestock. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes. Do you want to
Micro, yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Basri. He was supposed to join us for the panel on biodiversity. So we just had a panel on biodiversity, and your portal are very, very important. Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I add something to I think that's a really good point, but I think it also neglects the public health perspective of it. Because not only with the temperature increases, yes, there's plants and seeds and animals, but there's also malaria risk that goes up. For example, in Kenya, you have mosquitoes now that are above the malaria line, and that will just increase as it gets warmer. And the same thing can happen in Ethiopia and other places with high elevations, and even go into Europe, to southern Europe. So I think there's a very important public health perspective that is sometimes neglected and may get people's attention a bit more readily than talking about the mice, for example. But though it's important, I mean, I wouldn't want my house in Stockholm full of mice.
So do we have any other question? Yeah.
This has been excellent discussion, but I wanted to come back to the drought principle of the round table. As crops move north, what is left behind? Which will be the crops that we will have to grow? And we have to make some very hard choices. If we look at the physics of evaporation, you need 3 times as much water to make 1 gram of wheat as you do to make 1 gram of millet. We may have to start looking not at how much water we use, but how much water we save. You need 3 tons more water to make 1 ton of wheat. So why are we not looking at millet and Ethiopian crops, for example, that we can now see is nutritious and water efficient, because of those are the crops that we now have to actually look at, because crop choice. And so, I mean, in Malaysia, when I first went, people said the rainy season, it rains 3 times a day. So I said, what about the dry season? They said it only rains once a day. So now we've had drought in Malaysia for the first time in living memory. For 3 months it didn't rain. We need people who know about real drought to come and tell us this is how you manage drought, because Malaysia has never had drought before. That transfer of technology is reverse linkage. If we transfer crops, we need the reverse linkage of which crop can we grow that other people know about, that we can actually make more efficient use of in our location. Back to evidence.
Thank you. And I would like to thank our panel for their graciousness in sharing their experiences with us, especially at the end of the day. Is there another question? I think we need to wrap up, and I'd like to ask Rachel, the rapporteur, just to go over the key messages of today.
Seta, I'd like to echo what you said. What a wonderful set of panelists who brought us rich ideas. And Seta, thank you for managing it so well and bringing out so many aspects of drought. We heard that you can't control drought, absolutely, but we can control the impacts. And in our discussions today, we've had many parts of that controlling of impacts. Ismahain and Fatima in particular highlighted the role of science and technology, whether it's data generation or whether it's technological approaches to new crops, new water management systems, because in the end, drought is just about lack of water. We heard all about the really complexities of policy, whether it's how to balance that incredible diversity of water allocation. When we come to a drought, that becomes squeezed even more. Of course, humans will always take a priority, but how do we make those value judgments? And we heard from Radwan those ideas, and from Sam, what was brought in successfully doing it. It's about laws, it's about regulations, about policies, multi-sectoral policies, it's about trade agreements, many things that people forget about as we're wanting to look into it. We also thought a little bit about the role of donors. Alexandra highlighted donors are not just about coming in when there's a crisis. We all remember those images from Ethiopia, and international donors came rushing in to deal with the crisis management. But in fact, USAID is helping countries prepare to manage the risk of it, so we don't get to that stage. And I think that's a very important consideration for us. We also heard about the really important role of international banks. And we know that finance comes into it, whether this is investments in infrastructure, whether it's dams, whether it's storage of grain. We heard about that. Banks have a very important role to play in that. But particularly in insurance, because we know we need to offset those risks. If there's a drought in Morocco today, there's probably not a drought in Kazakhstan. So we can spread that risk and ensure more stakeholders have access to the type of risk and insurance policies that the major businesses have. So I think today we've had a very rich set of ideas, and thank you for bringing us the context of, we've been talking about drought for a long time, whether it's the Quran, the Torah, or the Bible. What we can learn about, I mean, they had it pretty good, didn't they? They had the right, we have to manage the good years with the bad years. And I know with this rich set of experiences we've shown from the panelists today and from our audience, we will be able to develop smart climate change adaptations to manage the resilience for areas managing drought going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.